Hi, it's Readathon Reading 18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. In this video, I will be recapping and giving little mini reviews of the 8 books that I read this month. That is May 2026. The bulk of the books that I read this month, 5 out of 8, and the first 5 I'll talk about, are the 5 titles that I chose for Asian Readathon. And for folks who are unfamiliar, I will link the announcement video below explaining Asian Readathon. It's a fantastic readathon that I've been doing for a number of years that is focused on celebrating the many amazing diverse books by Asian authors. And, like every year, this year there was a theme and a set of prompts, and the kind of rules of Asian Readathon are that you can double up prompts if you want. For example, if you pick a book that satisfies 2 prompts, you can count that towards 2. But however many books you end up reading for the readathon, you are encouraged to choose books by authors of different Asian ethnicities and or books that feature Asian characters of different ethnicities to recognize and celebrate the diversity of Asian identities. So I usually try to pick 1 book per prompt if I can, and I've done that this year. This year's theme was K-pop demon hunters, which I am going to go ahead and acknowledge that I know precisely nothing about. So folks who are familiar with K-pop demon hunters might recognize the names of the 5 prompts in ways that I don't. So my book choices have nothing to do with any of the kind of inspiration that might have come from K-pop demon hunters, and I've just gone very literal with the prompts, as you'll see. But I've had a great time. I tried this year to pick some authors that I had never read before, which I don't always do, but I like to try. And I ended up reading 3 out of 5 authors that are new to me. So I'll chat through my 5 Asian Readathon books, and then I will share the other 3 books that I read towards the end of the month once I'd finished all the prompts. So the first prompt in the readathon is how it's done. Read a book featuring a confident, skilled, or highly capable main character, or read a book that teaches you something. So I went for the first half of that, choosing the confident, skilled, or highly capable main character. And the book that I chose is Blood for the Undying Throne by Sung-il Kim, translated by Anton Her. And Sung-il Kim is a South Korean author. Anton Her is also Korean and a well-known author as well. And this book is a fantasy, and it is a little bit of a difficult one to give a account of because it is the second book in the Bleeding Empire series, and this is a series that I will say, so far I'm really enjoying. I definitely plan to pick up the 3rd book when it comes out this year. I believe it's coming out. I will undoubtedly continue the series. It is it's political fantasy. It is a lot of kind of maneuvering, I would say. There is a bit of an element of science fiction as well as fantasy. There is a dragon involved. It is a really, really cool kind of epic fantasy series. And the second book, Blood for the Undying Throne, has quite a different tone than the first one. I found the first novel in the series to be kind of more of an action, kind of quest feeling novel, whereas this one felt much more introspective. It felt slower. It did have a little bit of that kind of middle book feeling, because it is very continuous, the series. It really picks up right where the first book left off. And, it ends in a way that have a sense of where the third book is going to pick up. I do think the first book could work as a standalone. Like if you wanted to check out the Bleeding Empire series and you didn't continue with it for whatever reason, I think the first one would be a satisfying read on its own. But Blood for the Undying Throne absolutely requires you to have read the first book first. It will not make sense otherwise. I definitely recommend this series. It's really exciting. I thought the second book really delved into some interesting themes in terms of kind of regret and responsibility. Of the 3 point of view characters, one of them is in the past as compared to the other two. So there is this kind of interesting element of the book that is about how the past has shaped the present and by extension how the present will shape the future. And I think that was really, really well done. There are some really interesting female characters in this book, including point of view characters that I really appreciated. Definitely really like this fantasy series very much. The second prompt for Asian Readathon was Golden. Read a book about a character chasing a dream, or read a book with gold on the cover. And for this prompt, I went with gold on the cover. And I actually had quite a few books, sitting on either my e-reader or my shelf that had gold on the cover that I could use for this. And so I went for the one that had been sitting on my e-reader a bit longer than some of the others. And that was Midnight Doorways, a collection of short stories by Usman T. Malik, who is a author from Pakistan. And these are, I would say, predominantly horror short stories. They have elements of kind of speculative, almost veering into new weird territory, I would say. Maybe not quite, but in that line of thinking. And they have kind of mythological and spiritual influences in them as kind of a through line, I would say. The 7 stories vary quite dramatically in terms of length. Like they're all short stories. Maybe one's almost a novella, but they're all kind of connected by this kind of folkloric and mythological influence that they have. And I really enjoyed this collection. The one caveat I would say in terms of recommending this collection is to read the content warnings, because I will say that they are warranted. Some of the stories in Midnight Doorways were fucking scary. Fucking scary. It's like scary, like hard to read at night before going to bed, kind of scary. I'm not generally predominantly a horror reader, I will say. I'm stepping into horror a little bit. I'm figuring out what I like when it comes to horror. Most years I kind of find a handful of titles I want to read and then read them all in October. But yeah, I don't know. This was really good though. I have read Usman Malik before. I believe in another collection he had a story in it. But reading all of these works from him, I really appreciate his writing style a lot. It's very atmospheric. It's very evocative. Very, very well written. I would definitely pick up something else from him. And if you're looking for something interesting for spooky season, Midnight Doorways would be a really good pick. Just do mind the content warnings on that one. The third prompt for Asian Readathon is Soda Pop. Read a book that is light and fun, or a book with stylish, bold elements. And this prompt challenged me a little bit, I have to say, because light and fun is not generally where my fiction reading goes. And stylish, bold elements is one of those prompts that's a bit tricky to identify ahead of time, I feel like. Hard to tell before you read the book. But I had a arc of a book that I thought would fit well with this, and it did. And that is City of Others by Jared Poon. This is a new author to me, and this is a debut novel. It is set in Singapore, and it is a urban fantasy novel. It is going to be part of a series, to my understanding, but I will say I found it quite satisfying as a standalone. I thought it was really nicely self-contained. It definitely leaves room for, the characters to have more adventures, kind of thing. But it's not one that you finish and feel pissed off because there's no resolution. I didn't actually realize it was going to be part of a series until after I finished. I'm glad that it is, because I will definitely pick up the next one. I really enjoyed this. Urban fantasy is not always my, preferred genre in fantasy, but I really liked the Singaporean setting in this. It follows a character named Ben, who is kind of middle management in a governmental department called the Division for the Engagement of Unusual Stakeholders. And this is basically the government department set with managing kind of human relations with different kinds of fantastical species and creatures and different kinds of, communities, I guess, that live within Singapore. And I thought this book was so clever. It deals with some serious things, for sure, but it's very funny. And I think that Jared Poon does a great job of managing to maintain a level of levity and humor while serious things are happening, and while dealing with some fairly serious themes in terms of grief and things like this come up in the story. But it was really, really fun. I really appreciated the representation of Ben and his boyfriend Adam in the book. I liked the way that their relationship was depicted, and when the book starts, they're kind of early on in their relationship. So it's not a romance at all. Like, there's really not much of a romance element in the book at all, but they're still in that kind of getting to know each other, figuring out how each other, is feeling stage, which is interesting. And I really liked how that was represented in the book. So definitely, if you like urban fantasy, I would check out City of Others. If the premise of it sounds interesting, which I think it really does, definitely check it out. It was, I would say, light and fun, but not in a way that felt inconsequential or something like that. I think sometimes light and fluffy can sound a bit like, oh, is this book does it have substance? And I would say that it absolutely does, while being light and funny in ways that I really liked. The fourth prompt for Asian Readathon is free. Read a book by an Asian author where characters balance two different identities or fight a hidden or internal struggle. This prompt, I am going to admit that I may have gone a little bit far afield, because I decided to interpret the word characters very liberally, and I chose nonfiction for this. I read Queer Ancient Ways, A Decolonial Exploration by Zhairong Zhang, and this is a book which explores deities, particularly Babylonian and Nahua deities, and kind of mythological figures, and how, in the context of Western colonial anthropology and in translation, these figures have been wedged into binary understandings of gender that in some cases are, certainly troubled by, if not completely contradicted by, the source material. And so the book kind of explores what this says about Western gendered thinking in this kind of impulse to impose that on how these other kind of cultural contexts are understood, if that makes sense. It was a quite densely theoretical work. I would say, it may be one that would be challenging for readers not coming from some degree of background in kind of cultural theory, queer theory, cultural studies kinds of fields. Certainly part of the argument is that colonial Western binary understandings of gender have been being thwarted and undermined long before the kind of naming of what is now kind of constellated as queer theory. That is a massive part of the argument. I would say terminology-wise, there's definitely some areas where one might have a hard time if not familiar with some of the subject matter already. I really, really liked this. This is one of my favorite books that I read all month. And I think that for folks who are interested in kind of the idea of archetypes and the idea of archetypes as universalizable, this might be a really interesting read. In terms of who might watch my channel, I think if the idea of archetypes or myth, is of interest, then this book would be a good one to pick up. The last prompt for Asian Readathon is your idol versus what it sounds like. Read a book by an Asian author with dark themes or a book about friendship or chosen family. I chose the dark themes option, and I went very literal. And I chose After Dark by Haruki Murakami. I'm just going to say I can't take credit for this. Post-it flagging. My friend did that. This is her copy of the book. Thank you, friend, for lending me this book. I had never read Murakami before, and I've heard so much about Murakami. This is a book that all takes place over a single night in Tokyo. And it begins, I'll just read the back. It begins, 19-year-old Mari is waiting out the night at an anonymous Denny's when she meets a young man who insists he knows her older sister, thus setting her on an odyssey through the sleeping city. And it goes on. And it's described as infused with surrealism, a thrilling account of the magical hours separating midnight from dawn. I have very mixed feelings about this. I can very much see and appreciate what so many people appreciate in Murakami's writing now that I have encountered it for myself. I can see why his work is so widely read and widely appreciated from reading this. I also see why so many reviewers and readers that I know talk about the male gaze and, a level of patriarchal framing in some of his work. I did have a problem with some of the ways that some of the women in this book are depicted, for sure. Do I think that the writing is beautiful? Yes. Will I read more Murakami? Quite possibly. Thank you to my friend for lending. I really appreciate it. So that was the 5 books that I read for Asian Readathon. I did manage to finish 3 additional books towards the end of the month. I finished a book that I've been reading for quite a long time now, working through slowly, and that is the Tarot Activity book by Drea Bloom. This is a book that folks on my channel will probably be familiar with. Drea Bloom is an author of many excellent tarot books, including a series on one book of each of the 4 minor suits, which I really recommend based on having really enjoyed it so far. This book is organized into a couple of different sections: conversation starters, writing and journaling, and arts and crafts. And it's a series of activities, as the book's title suggests, to do with a tarot deck. And you can work with any tarot deck that you like. If you know Drea Bloom's work, you know that she really likes the Rider-Waite-Smith. And we'll tell you that in every book. I worked through with the Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess, and I had a great time. I read through the whole book, but I did the activities selectively, so I did not complete all of them. I will admit that I completed more from the conversation starters and the writing and journaling than I did from the arts and crafts. I don't have tarot decks sitting around that I'm going to cut up and paste on a bulletin board and all the rest of this kind of stuff that these activities involve. They don't all involve wrecking your deck, but some of them do, and I certainly wasn't going to do that to the deck that I was using for this. But I enjoyed some of the writing and reflecting that I got to do with this. I think that there's a lot of variety, and I also think that some of these would be really fun to do in a group. So if activities with your tarot deck that are not doing tarot readings is something that appeals to you, then this would be a book to check out for sure. I read an anthology called Meaningful Flesh: Reflections on Religion and Nature for a Queer Planet, edited by Whitney A. Bowman. This was a short collection of essays or articles, and as the title suggests, this is a collection that specifically brings together religion, or like religious thinking, ecology, and queer theory. That is the kind of nexus of things that all of the essays have in common in some way. I found this collection to be somewhat uneven. There was nothing in it that I really, I don't say didn't like. That sounds really trivial. There's just inevitably going to be some essays that I resonated with or feel like I learned more from than others, but there were some really excellent contributions here. I will just say that I wish that it was more diverse because it was very Christian in terms of the way in which religion was brought into the conversation with nature and ecology and queer theory. Overwhelmingly, that was in some kind of Christian or Christian adjacent way. I think that it would be interesting to see more essays like this that bring together kind of spirituality in different kinds of ways, or religion in different kinds of ways, with ecological and queer thinking. But other than that, I enjoyed this collection. It's definitely very much an academic collection, but I do think that it was it would be fairly accessible. It doesn't presume too much prior knowledge of any particular author or framework or anything like that. So I do think it's one that someone could pick up who's just interested in these topics and get something out of. Finally, the last book I finished was a debut novel that I received as an ARC called The Poet Empress by Shen Tao. And The Poet Empress follows a young girl who becomes a concubine and then wife to the soon-to-be emperor, the apparent heir to the emperor. I don't think that that's a spoiler because it's in the title. Empress. There's at the very beginning of the book, you don't know if she's going to be selected to go to the palace, but that happens very early on, so I think I'm not spoiling very much. The Poet Empress was excellent, I thought. Beautiful writing, really well-developed world. This is it's a fantasy novel for sure. There is magic involved. There is a dragon involved. There's sigil crafting involved. There are definite fantasy elements, but it reads to me overwhelmingly like historical fiction. I would say it reads like 85% historical fiction and 15% fantasy to me. The fantasy elements are important, but I think the emphasis is much more on the, you know, the politics of who's going to become the next emperor and kind of vying for power. The main character has to kind of face the different other concubines who are also vying for kind of more elevated positions as well, who would see her as a threat and vice versa. And I think that as a debut novel, it's very, very impressive. I think that the writing was really good. I just really liked a lot about this. I will mention it is, for some inexplicable reason, tagged with romantasy on Goodreads. This is not a romantasy at all. I would say that there is no romance in this book at all. This is a historical feeling fantasy novel, not romantasy. And this one I would definitely recommend if a historical feeling fantasy with a clearly Chinese inspired setting is something that appeals to you, with a female protagonist, female point of view. Really, really good. I will just say, caveat, read the content warnings. This is a very heavy book. It includes very much on-page torture and violence, and it is not an easy read at all. For some, that will mean it maybe is not the best fit. I really, really think that it was excellent. So it was a really good finish to the month of May. Those are the 8 books that I read in the month of May. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, if you read anything fabulous in May that you would like to tell me about. I would love to hear about it. If you have anything lined up for June that you're really excited to read, I would love to hear about that too. I don't think I'm going to readathon for June. I think I'm just going to, read what I feel like, with some attentiveness to the fact that, of course, June I will be celebrating Pride Month. So I will look forward to talking about that in a future video. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great